Before you donate that old jewelry box or let it sit in a drawer for another decade, take one more look. Some of the plainest looking earrings sitting in an estate sale bin or a grandmother's jewelry roll are quietly worth thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, and almost nobody checks before they let them go. Here are 8 old earrings that collectors are actively hunting for right now, ranked by what they can actually sell for. And there is a real chance you already own one of them without knowing it. Estate sales scouts and pawnshop veterans do one thing automatically that almost nobody else does. They flip every single piece over before they even look at the front, because the value never lives in how a piece looks from across the room. It lives on the back in a stamp, a smell, a weight, a cut of stone nobody makes by hand anymore. We are not talking about anything that requires a jeweler's loupe or a lab coat. Every test on this list you can do tonight at your own kitchen table with things you already own. And this is not a list of the 10 most famous names in vintage jewelry either. 2 names that usually show up on lists like this got cut entirely, because being collectible inside a small hobbyist community is not the same as being worth real money to an ordinary person holding a pair for the first time, and a couple of new names took their place specifically because more people already own them without realizing it. By the end of this list, you will know exactly where to look, and the 8th pair alone might be worth going through that box one more time tonight. 3 things to do before you even start sorting. Turn every single piece over, because the front almost never tells you anything. Run a small magnet near anything that claims to be sterling or solid gold, because true sterling and true gold are not magnetic, and a piece that grabs the magnet is base metal wearing a fancier name. And keep matching sets together instead of splitting them into a pile of loose singles, because a full set is very often worth more than the sum of its individual pieces sold apart. Number 8, the Crown Trifari earrings. If your family ever shopped an American department store between the 1940s and the 1960s, there is a real chance a pair of Trifari earrings came home in a gift box at some point, and that ordinary history is exactly why so many valuable pairs are still sitting forgotten in dresser drawers today. Here is what most people never learn about this brand. In 1930, Trifari hired a designer named Alfred Philippe away from Cartier and Van Cleef and Arpels, 2 of the most respected fine jewelry houses on earth. And he brought their techniques with him: invisible stone settings, hand-finished prongs, construction methods that had never touched costume jewelry before. Philippe stayed at Trifari for 38 years, right up until 1968, and collectors generally treat everything designed under his watch as the era that matters most. With pieces made after he left considered a step down in both design and construction, some of his most famous designs, the so-called fruit salad pieces, clusters of molded glass in ruby red, sapphire blue, and emerald green, shaped like little bunches of fruit, are exactly what serious collectors search estate sales, hoping to find. Now for the honest numbers, because inflating this helps nobody. Most ordinary Trifari pairs bring $20 to $50, and plenty of channels will not tell you that part. But signed, collectible pieces climb into the $200 to $800 range, and the ceiling on this brand is genuinely startling. A Trifari poured glass piece with crystal stones sold at auction for over $4,000 in 2023, and fruit salad earrings from that same era chase serious money today. Here is the mark to look for, and it changed over time, which trips people up constantly. Pieces from the 1930s and into the 1940s are often stamped simply KTF, for the 3 founders, Trifari, Craftsman and Fischl. It was not until the 1950s that the little crown symbol appeared, sitting above the letter T on the back of the earring. Both marks are genuine, both are worth checking for, and a KTF mark, if anything, points to the older, sometimes more desirable pieces, not a lesser one. That crown or that KTF stamp is the difference between costume clutter and a collector reaching for their wallet. One more thing worth knowing before you move on. Other companies openly copied the fruit salad look once it caught on, so weight is a useful second check alongside the mark. Genuine Trifari settings feel noticeably heavier in the hand, and the prongs holding each stone are neatly finished on the back, never rough or sharp against your finger. A piece that feels light and flimsy, even with a crown stamped on it, is more likely a later reproduction than an original 1940s pair. And that 10-second weight test alone saves collectors from a lot of expensive mistakes. Number 7. The Chanel Gripoix clip earrings. This is the entry that surprises people the most, because most shoppers assume anything with the Chanel name has to be the real gold and gemstone kind, kept behind glass, not sitting in a jewelry roll. Coco Chanel did something deliberately radical in the 1920s. She started wearing costume jewelry made from poured glass right alongside her real diamonds, on purpose, so that nobody at a party could tell which pieces were priceless and which ones cost almost nothing. It was a statement about status itself, and it is exactly why Chanel partnered with the Gripoix family workshop in Paris, an atelier that has poured colored glass into gold tone settings for the house since the 1920s, and in many cases still does it entirely by hand today, the same way it did a century ago. Here is what collectors specifically hunt for. Clip-on earrings, not the modern pierced reissues sold in boutiques now, made from the saturated jewel-tone glass Gripoix is famous for. Especially anything carrying the interlocking CC logo stamped clearly on the back alongside a season or collection code. Common signed pairs from recent decades typically sell in the $150 to $600 range on the resale and vintage dealer market. But early Gripoix pairs, the oversized 1980s designs in particular, have sold at auction for $3,000 to over $4,500. That is a costume clip earring worth more than plenty of fine jewelry sitting in the same display case. Flip it over, look for the CC, and do not assume a missing hallmark automatically means it is fake, because some of the earliest pieces from the 1930s were never stamped consistently at all, which is exactly why an expert opinion matters before you sell one for nothing. One caution here that costs people real money every year. The Chanel name is one of the most counterfeited in all of costume jewelry, and flea markets are full of pairs with a crisp new CC stamped on the back and glass that looks a little too perfect, too uniform, too light in the hand. Genuine vintage Gripoix glass carries tiny internal bubbles and slight color variation from piece to piece because it was poured by hand into the mold, not injection molded by machine, and that small imperfection is actually the proof you want to see, not a flaw to worry about. Number 6. The Eisenberg Sterling Era Earrings. This one has the strangest origin story on the entire list. Eisenberg began in the 1930s purely as a dress company, and the glittering clips sewn directly onto the garments were only meant to help the clothes sell on the rack. Then, according to the story collectors still repeat, customers started unpinning the jewelry and walking out of stores with just the clips, leaving the dresses behind, so the company gave up and started selling the jewelry entirely on its own. History intervened a second time a few years later. Wartime metal restrictions in 1943 forced Eisenberg to abandon the cheap base pot metal every costume brand relied on, and switched to genuine sterling silver because pot metal was needed for the war effort. That accident, a shortage nobody planned for, created the single most valuable error the company ever produced. The advertising of the day called the clear rhinestone pieces Eisenberg Ice, and some were marketed as collector pieces the moment they left the factory, because even then the price was noticeably high. If you think you own a pair, turn the earring over and look for two things together: the word sterling stamped into the metal, and the Eisenberg name, ideally reading Eisenberg Original Sterling. That exact combination, from those 2 wartime years specifically, is what dealers quietly hunt through estate sales, hoping the family never researched it. Clean-signed sterling pairs commonly bring $150 to $600, and the rarest oversized 1940s designs have pushed well past $1,000. Hold a sterling-era Eisenberg next to a modern costume earring, and the modern piece feels like a toy, because the stones are enormous, the settings are heavy, and the whole thing was built with the expectation that it would outlive its owner. It usually did, and that is exactly why it is worth money now. Keep in mind how short that window really was. Once the war ended in 1945 and pot metal became easy to get again, Eisenberg mostly went back to it, which means genuine sterling pieces come from a production run of roughly 2 years and nothing more. That narrow window, more than the design itself, is the real reason serious collectors treat sterling-era Eisenberg as its own separate category, worth more than everything the company made before or after it. We are 3 names down, and 3 more to go before this list stops being about a brand on the back at all and starts being about the material itself. Number 5. The Bakelite earrings. Now we reach the entry that sounds like a joke until you see the numbers, because old plastic earrings can genuinely outsell gold-plated jewelry. Bakelite was one of the very first plastics ever invented, and it was molded into cheerful, chunky earrings. All through the 1930s and 1940s, sold cheaply at the time as costume novelty pieces. For decades afterward, families threw it away by the handful, because who on earth keeps old plastic once it goes out of style? That casual destruction across 2 generations is exactly why the survivors are worth real money today. On the collector market, Bakelite earrings start around $100, average close to $400, and the finest carved examples reach nearly $7,000. Plastic. Sit with that for a moment. Color decides almost everything with this material, more than shape or size. True turquoise Bakelite is especially prized because that shade tends to shift toward green with age, which makes an untouched turquoise pair genuinely rare. Translucent pieces, the ones you can hold up to a lamp and see light pass through, rank among the most valuable of all. And carved designs or earrings that combine several colors in one piece command hundreds or thousands, while a plain, simple pair in a single color sits closer to $30. Collectors even have nicknames for the most prized shades. Butterscotch for a rich caramel yellow, apple juice for a clear warm amber, and root beer for a deep reddish brown. And pieces in exactly those colors regularly sell for more than the same design molded in plain black or red, simply because so few of them survived in good condition. Here is the test you can run at your own kitchen sink tonight, no equipment required. Hold the earrings under hot running water for a few seconds and smell them, because genuine Bakelite releases a distinctive chemical, almost formaldehyde, like scent, that plastic imitations never produce. A cotton swab dipped in a little household cleaning polish rubbed gently on the piece will also leave a yellow residue on genuine Bakelite. Modern plastic reproductions, flooding the market for years now, fail both tests immediately. The cherry red hoops your grandmother wore to church might quietly pay for your next vacation, and she would have laughed at the idea. Number 4. The Miriam Haskell pearl earrings. This is one of the categories that genuinely breaks my heart when I see it treated carelessly, because nobody builds jewelry this way anymore, and nobody has for decades. Miriam Haskell opened her first shop inside the McAlpin Hotel in New York in 1926, on the idea that a woman should own several pieces of jewelry for different occasions instead of wearing the same one forever, which was a genuinely new way of thinking about costume jewelry at the time. Her longtime designer, Frank Hess, led the look for more than 30 years, and the workshop itself was staffed largely by European-trained jewelers. Several of them refugees who brought fine jewelry techniques with them and applied those same techniques to faux pearls and glass. Her handmade earrings were worn by Hollywood names like Joan Crawford and Lucille Ball, while staying affordable enough for ordinary women. Which is exactly why these pieces spread into regular American homes by the thousands instead of staying locked in a handful of famous jewelry boxes. Pick one up and actually look at the construction. Every single bead is individually wired onto a filigree backplate by hand, layered like needlework done in metal, never glued the way almost every competitor did it. That obsessive labor is a door that closed decades ago. You cannot buy that kind of craftsmanship new in any store today, at any price. Now the honest picture, because it matters. A common gold tone pair with faux pearls typically sells for around $160, which is pleasant but not life-changing. The real money lives in the sets. A Haskell set with a colorful beaded necklace and matching earrings brought $2,400 in 2023. And another set with ruby-colored crystal and rhinestones sold for $950 the following year. So if your mother's earrings have a matching necklace somewhere in that same jewelry box, do not separate them, because together they can be worth many times what the earrings bring alone. Check the underside of the backplate for the oval Haskell signature before anything leaves the house. One nuance worth knowing before you write anything off. Not every genuine Haskell piece is signed. Some of the earliest work from the 1920s and 1930s left the workshop without any mark at all, identified today only by the construction itself. The hand wiring, the layered filigree, the specific way the faux pearls sit against the backplate, which is exactly why an unsigned piece in that style still gets a second look from serious dealers instead of being dismissed as ordinary costume jewelry. Number 3, the plain, solid, gold earrings. This is the least glamorous entry on the entire list, and it might be the most profitable one for the person watching right now. So forget style completely for the next minute and think only about weight. Gold is trading north of $4,000 a troy ounce this year, more than double what it was worth just a few years ago. And most people have simply not caught up to that change mentally. That dated pair of chunky 14-carat door-knocker hoops from the 1980s, the ones you would never wear in public again, can carry several $100s in pure melt value based on nothing but their weight sitting on a scale. They do not need to be pretty, and they do not even need to be intact, because broken pieces and single earrings melt down exactly the same as a matched pair. Nobody is buying the design, they are buying the metal. Reputable gold buyers pay between 70 and 90% of melt value, and that spread becomes enormous once you get into heavy pieces. Weigh your gold at home first on a kitchen scale. Look up the melt value yourself using the carat stamp stamped inside the post or the hoop. 10 carat, 14 carat, 18 carat, and get quotes from at least 3 different buyers before a single gram leaves your hand. The first offer is almost never the best offer. The entire business model of certain buyers depends specifically on you not knowing what $4,000 gold means for the forgotten jewelry sitting in your drawer right now. Do not be the person who funds that business with your own inheritance. One last thing before anything gets scrapped. If the piece has a designer's mark, a hallmark, or any kind of maker's signature stamped into it, stop and research that name first, because a signed piece can easily be worth several times its raw melt value, and a scrap buyer weighing it by the gram has no reason to ever mention that to you. Number 2, the old mine-cut diamond screwbacks. This is where family ignorance becomes genuinely expensive. If you inherited diamond earrings with old-fashioned screwback fittings instead of modern posts, look closely at the stones before you do anything else. If the diamonds look chunky and slightly lopsided, with a flat little window you can practically see straight through in the very middle of the stone, do not call them flawed. That flat facet is called an open cullet, and it is the signature of an old mine-cut diamond, shaped entirely by hand with the proportions eyeballed by a cutter rather than calculated by machine. Jewelers largely abandoned that hand-cut style by the early 20th century in favor of the modern round, brilliant, engineered specifically to maximize sparkle under electric light. Since the old cut essentially no longer gets made, the surviving stones are genuinely rare, and the market treats them exactly that way. Prized today for a soft, candle-lit glow that modern cuts do not reproduce. Old mine-cut diamond earrings start around $200, average close to $10,000, and the finest documented pairs have been listed above $140,000. Those are asking and auction estimate figures rather than a guaranteed payout for every single pair, but even modest antique examples land solidly in the thousands. All through the 1980s and 1990s, families routinely carried these earrings to jewelers who recut the old stones into modern round shapes to make them look new and fashionable. And every single recut destroyed the antique value forever, permanently, with no way to reverse it. The crooked, old-fashioned look your family found embarrassing is precisely what collectors now pay a premium for. If your pair survived untouched, never let anyone recut them, and take them specifically to an appraiser who specializes in antique diamonds, not the counter at the mall. Do not confuse this cut with the later old European cut, which has a rounder outline and a smaller, sharper cullet, closer to a modern stone than a true antique one. Both are hand-cut, and both hold real value, but true old mine-cut stones, with their squarish outline and that unmistakable open window at the base, are generally the rarer and more sought-after of the two, and a specialist appraiser can tell you which one is actually sitting in your family's earrings within about a minute under a loupe. Number 1, the natural pearl earrings. This is where everything on this list comes together, because the most valuable earrings here are the ones that look the most ordinary of all. And one laboratory test separates grocery money from a life-changing sale. Almost every pearl sold in the last 100 years is cultured, meaning a farmer deliberately started the pearl growing inside a living oyster. A technique commercialized in the early 1900s and standard across the entire industry within a generation. But if your earrings date from before the 1920s, there is a real chance the pearls formed entirely on their own in the wild, with no human involvement at all, and that single difference rewrites everything about what they are worth. Cultured pearls typically range from about $100 to $20,000 for the finest matched examples. Natural pearls start around $500 and can surpass $100,000. And they are so scarce today that they almost never appear in ordinary retail stores anymore, surfacing instead in old family jewelry, museum collections, and major auction houses. Now, the warning that keeps this honest, because this exact mistake happens constantly in living rooms every week. Most inherited pearls turn out to be early cultured pearls from the 1920s or 1930s, and old second-hand cultured pearls on their own are frankly not worth very much at all. You cannot tell the difference by looking, by weight, or by feel, and neither can a pawnshop counter. There are hints worth noticing before you ever pay for a test, family history reaching back before the 1920s. A slightly irregular or baroque shape instead of a perfectly round bead, and drill holes that look hand-done, rather than machine uniform under a bit of magnification. None of that proves anything on its own. It just tells you whether spending the money on a proper test is worth doing in the first place. Never let anyone guess. Only an X-ray test at a proper gem laboratory can prove what is actually growing inside the pearl, layer by layer, and that test costs a tiny fraction of what a genuine natural pearl is worth. The plain little pearl drops nobody in your family ever fought over might quietly be the single most valuable thing your family owns. And the only person who will ever find that out is the one who bothers to check. 8 pairs, and the pattern behind every one of them is the same. Value hides in the details nobody bothers to check anymore. A stamp on the back, a smell under hot water. A weight on a kitchen scale, a cut of stone nobody makes by hand today. None of these tests require an expert standing over your shoulder, and none of them cost more than a few minutes before you decide to sell, donate, or throw out anything old sitting in a drawer. The families who lose out here are almost never the ones who own cheap jewelry. They are the ones who never once turned it over. So before that box leaves the house for good, go through it one more time, piece by piece, and check the back of every single pair. Do not sort by what looks expensive, because almost nothing on this list looks expensive at first glance, and that is exactly the point. Sort by what is old, what came from a relative, and what you never quite got around to wearing. A name you recognize, a stamp you don't, a smell, a weight, a flat little window in the middle of a stone. That is genuinely all it takes to separate a drawer full of nothing from a drawer worth a phone call to an appraiser. The one your family always called the ugly clip-on earrings, the ones nobody would ever wear out of the house, might be the one worth the most.